Thank you, everyone. I'm speaking on behalf of our lead researcher, Amy Zhang, who sends her regrets, and of course our many authors for this particular paper. And the paper, I put the slides out on the MisInfoWeb hashtag, and you can also see a link to the paper as well. So before I start on the actual work that we did for the paper, just a little bit of background on our work with the Credibility Coalition. We are an interdisciplinary group of many folks from media theory, journalism, computer science, design, and other fields. And we grew out of MisInfoCon, which was a conference focused on misinformation and kind of applied solutions, as hosted at MIT Media Lab and the Nieman Foundation at Harvard. This group grew out of a perceived need that many people were annotating content for the credibility or consuming data about content credibility, and that we needed a common framework in which we could work together to share data and to understand what we really mean by credibility and what specific indicators are. We do workshops. We've done workshops at Columbia with Post-it notes thinking about indicators. We have a weekly Slack Google Meet call and we have a Slack channel. We're very diverse set of disciplines represented in our group, and a number of organizations who are involved. And so, in many ways, I'm trying to reflect the work that was done and to kind of emphasize that this was a very highly collaborative project, with support from a number of foundations and platforms as well. So the larger question of the Credibility Coalition is, can we agree on scientific and systematic ways to assess the credibility of information, whether they can be applied at scale? And this paper is one very small exploration of this question, and the work is very much ongoing. So once again, this is the focus on the paper is a structured response to misinformation, defining, annotating credibility indicators in news articles. And so I want to talk through this process and what we mean by news articles and the specific indicators we looked at. So essentially what our process is we look at stories of unassessed credibility. We mark them up looking with specific indicators, and we have different ways of thinking about that. There's expert markup, so domain experts around climate science, public health. There are journalism students who might be coming with a perspective of journalism. There might be a world in which we do automated analysis. We haven't done that for this particular paper. And then we aggregate the testing data. And I'll have links to that data that we release publicly. But what we don't do is we don't interpret the data, set up scores. We really want to make that data available for researchers, people building AIs, platforms, etc. So with our particular study, we looked at 50 articles total. There are 40 that are reflected in the paper. We've had 9 annotators, 6 of whom were in the paper. Again, this is an ongoing process. And then 16 indicators. We divided indicators into 2 types. There's the content indicators, so indicators of credibility that are in the text itself. I'll talk through the tool that Text Thresher, which was used to look at content, and then context. So looking at indicators around the content that require outside research or that understand relationships with that content. So, for example, I'll go through very specific examples of this. But a clickbait title, you can assess the clickbaitiness of a title without having to go look outside. You can define what clickbait means and analyze that. Whereas understanding if the citations in the article are representative of the conclusions in the scientific journal that was cited requires you to go look outside of the content and into the actual context. We have full definitions available for all of these if you want to take a look. Again, I'll tweet out these links on credweb.org and in the W3C style vocabulary document. So the way we did this, we did article selection. So we selected, for those 50 articles, we looked at the most shared content on social media around public health and climate science, according to BuzzSumo. So we went onto BuzzSumo, put in keywords related to these topics, and then selected a top 50 based on just raw shares. We made sure that we're looking for predominantly text-based content at the moment. Obviously, images and videos are really critical to misinformation, but we're focusing just on text for this particular study, and also that they're still online. A lot of misinformation, as we know, sometimes will disappear for various reasons. So this was the most shared article, about 1.9 million shares, and is a study about a Johns Hopkins researcher who is questioning the efficacy of flu vaccines, and there's a lot of There's a lot of, there's already a fact check about this, but we saw that amongst public health and climate science, there's a lot of misinformation being shared, or miscontextualization. And so we worked with annotators. We brought in annotators from six journalism school students, so recent graduates, Northwestern, Columbia, Santa Clara, part of our broader network. 3 UC Berkeley annotators came from the Sense and Sensibility and Science course. It was taught by our second author in the paper, Aditya Ranganathan. And they're selected for the skills in scientific critical thinking. So for specific indicators, we try to find students who have specific expertise in the issues we're exploring. Each annotator received an annotation guide and some compensation, an assumption about 10 to 20 hours of annotation, and they work. And then we also worked with a set of domain experts in public health and climate science to set a kind of a gold standard around credibility for these specific articles, so we can do some comparison. Annotator demographics, we did look at diversity around politics, around demographics, etc. I think we could do better there, but we are collecting kind of the background of annotators because we understand that credibility is assessed in different ways by different people. And so the tools we use, this is Text Thresher, developed by the team public editor at the Berkeley Institute for Data Science. And so this tool is designed for highlighting pieces of text and marking them up according to a specific indicator. And so here they're citing, they're looking at experts who've been cited. And then a tool called Check, built by Mina, the company I'm at, which is typically used by journalists, gives them a structured way to analyze news articles and do verification in a structured way. So multiple choice, checkboxes, time and date, things like that. And so with Text Thresher, we did content indicators. With Check, we did context indicators. So some of their findings are, we did find that there's some correlation with credibility. Again, there's a very small study, so we're really exploring the methods here. But we found representativeness of citations, outside sources, results of a fact check from an IFCN signatory, Daniel Funke, on the panel earlier, represented IFCN. Clickbait assessment of a title, exaggerated emotionally charged tone. So what does that look like? So here's one of the articles we were looking at that had a clickbait what was assessed as clickbait. And so 6 pharmaceutical drugs that immediately destroy your health. Because annotators were redundantly looking at indicators for any given article, they had different assessments of what clickbait genre this might fit into. So it might have been a listicle, it could have been defined convention, inducing fear. In reality, it's probably a little bit of all of this, but having multiple annotators looking at the single title give more richer information about what type of clickbaitedness this is, if it needs qualifies as such. These are some of the highlights that people made about exaggerated or emotionally charged tone. And so words like alarming, some pharmaceutical medicines can cause you immediate psychological damage. Keep reading to find out which ones. What that means, how do you operationalize what quantify emotionally charged tone? I think we need to dig into further, but this gives us an initial data set to start looking at that. In regards to advertising, the quantity of ads, content recommendation boxes, and sponsored content, we ask annotators to literally just count them, does not have a significant correlation with credibility. And that was an interesting finding, and again, caveats all around. It's reflected, there's some of our media researchers in our team didn't find that surprising because of this convergence of business models in the attention economy. So this is a high cred article from Mike that has a pop-up immediately that would count as a kind of type of advertisement, lots of advertisements on the side. And here's a low cred article about public health that didn't appear to have any advertisements at all. So the number of ads actually didn't seem to have a strong correlation. But the assessment of ad placement as aggressive, and what does that mean, is something I think we need to dig into, does suggest a difference between credible and non-credible content. And so an example of that is so an annotator, they give, nice thing about working with annotators, is the qualitative feedback they gave on the process is the page for the article calls for readers to share using multiple buttons, as well as the actual text telling readers to share via social media. So they're helping us think through what these indicators are. So the annotators are not just people who are just plugging in data, but they're actually helping us think through and redefine indicators in more precise ways. And so this was the example article where that comment came from, and you can see the aggressive calls to share is directly in the text. You can see the multiple types of ads, and so this was one way in which we might dig into what aggressive means and start to think about more quantifiable indicators there. And we also asked annotators to assess the credibility of the article at the beginning before they do the annotation exercise, and then assess credibility at the end. And again, remember, we had that kind of gold standard credibility assessments. And so what was interesting to us was seeing after they had gone through the process, a lot of these indicators we actually developed using known media literacy techniques. We did find that after answering the annotation questions, annotators themselves, their assessments of credibility started to align more closely with those of domain experts. Again, there's a small correlation. I think there's more research to be done there, but it did point to a direction about these indicators, not just as a way to classify content, but also as a way to potentially work with annotators to train around basic concepts of media literacy and news literacy. And so we did collect feedback from the annotators. We did qualitative interviews, and this was not in the paper, but I think we'll publish some of these later. Some of the feedback was positive. This helped us evaluate credibility, think about credibility in new ways. For others, one annotator said, "I can say the tedious process takes a toll on one's mental stamina," which helps us think through how you scale this up. Obviously, you can't just ask people to just dive in really deeply, but what are better user interfaces for assessing content? So it's working with annotators, again, that helps us think through this process of definition and then of assessment in more effective ways. So again, these are the indicators. We have the fuller definitions that we've placed on the crediweb.org. We're working with Sandra Hawk at the W3C Credible Web Community Group to start thinking about ways we can create a vocabulary here. We have releasing the data set and annotation guides. They're up on data.world, and again, the indicators and the papers available on this hashtag, on the MisinfoWeb hashtag. I've also tweeted these slides, so you can get these links directly. So again, what are we doing? Not developing a score. We're thinking about structure, infrastructure, process and data for validating that infrastructure. And finally, what's next is working to develop data for 5,000 to 10,000 articles, thanks to support from some of our partners and sponsors, with key goals around diversity and inclusion. Developing a series of ongoing research collaborations in a grant structure. We'd be keen to talk about that more. Releasing an open data set, following ethical data standards to support further research and make that available on Hypothesis, on data.world. Again, working with Sandro, who's here, and to define indicator vocabulary and then explore potential use cases as well. So very much ongoing work, and we see this study as just the beginning. So thank you. I'm not Amy Zhang, but this is Amy Zhang's information. And this is how you can reach us about Credibility Coalition, the Credible Web Community Group.
Thank you very much.